without further ado, I'm going to start. The title of this piece is Harpurhey, which is subtitled The Worst Place to Live in England. If you are going to our house, just ask the bus driver, to drop you off at Bernard Manning's world famous Embassy Club, which is 3 miles away from the centre of Manchester, down Rochdale Road. When you get off the bus, you will see a set of traffic lights at a junction where Rochdale Road meets Moston Lane. Cross over the road at this point and carry on walking down Moston Lane, past the North Manchester Bedding Centre, until you see a sign for Asda. Do not turn towards Asda, turn the other way and carry on walking up Beatty Street. Our house is in the second square on the left, number 15 Longdale Walk. I come from generations of poverty and social deprivation. The first house we lived in was demolished because it was a slum. The second house became so overcrowded we had to move out. The third house was demolished because it was a slum. I was 14 years old when we moved into what was then a new house on a modern low-rise pebble-dashed housing estate in Harpurhey, a district of Manchester that has subsequently been described as the worst place to live in England. Not the second or the third, my mother told me while we were talking on the telephone, but the worst. Can you imagine that? Of course I can, I said. I lived there, didn't I? We both laughed. Just give me a minute, love, and I will tell you what it goes on to say. I could hear her turning over the page. Here it is. The Manchester district of Harpurhey has been named as the most deprived neighbourhood in England. It gets the unwanted tag in a report for the Office of the Deputy Prime Minister. Researchers at Oxford University analysed the quality of life in 32,482 neighbourhoods in England. The study, called the Indices of Deprivation, covers income, employment, health, disability, education, skills and training, housing, crime and environment. Harpurhey came out as having the worst quality of life, whilst Chorleywood West, a stockbroker belt village in Hertfordshire, has the highest quality of life. Mind you, my mother continues, I think it would have been a different story if you had all stayed at home. We didn't, and she knew only too well why. My mother wanted each one of her 6 children to move away from home, so we might, as she put it, be able to make the most of ourselves. This phrase is familiar enough to me, and as I imagine it is to most of you, but now while I'm thinking about it, I question the notion of there being such a thing as a most that I or anyone else might ever be able to make of ourselves or of oneself. It is an achievement, isn't it, which I can imagine, to be or to become the most inventive inventor, or the most entrepreneurial entrepreneur, or the most beautiful man, or the most beautiful woman, the most gifted musician, the most influential influencer, the most artistic artist, or the most extraordinary whatever else it is, or it might be, or it might as yet, I suppose, still become. The thing that we, you or I, or anyone else might as yet, I suppose, still become. To become the most at what though? This is the question I keep asking myself. Something happens, I think, at the stage when we, most of us, move away, and for whatever reason it is, from the place that was our home. We leave behind a familiar environment which has been, what has it been? which has been the foundation, a specific foundation, or a bedrock. And be it, as they say, or as they used to move away from what has been the bosom of a warm and loving family, or a not so warm and a not so loving family, or to move away from a system that involved an amount of institutional intervention and subsequent care. Wherever or whatever it was the place where we began to develop a sense of belonging to a particular family, a particular institution, or a particular community. It was also the place where we might have experienced a sense of feeling of alienation, where we were being introduced to racial, religious, regional, cultural, class-based, gender-based divisions between people who, and for whatever reason, for one reason or another, might have wanted to consider themselves as being more like us, like what we are, or like what we were, whilst other people were deemed to be not like us, not like what we are, strangers, foreigners, deviants, etc. People who are going to arouse our suspicion, and I think more often than not, at least it was the case in my case, to arouse our desire. Wherever it was the place where we grew up, and it is the place that we, and perhaps forever, are going to have to explain. Where do you come from? And to come up with an answer that will satisfy the inquirer. I come from a close-knit community in the north of England, where everyone is very friendly, and they look after one another. We feel safe. The requirement, it would seem, to come up with an amount of information throughout the course of a conversation to try to explain our own sense of belonging, and to a large extent, I think, our own sense of being whoever it is we imagine ourselves to be. An amount of information that may or it might not be immediately apparent that this is who, or that this is what we are. Oh, I see. Or, oh, I would never have guessed that about you. Things that are supposed to be or to become a fundamental influence over the way we are able to proceed through or from one stage of our existence to another. Where do you come from? It is there, isn't it, in the so many ways that the people are going to be able to tell themselves certain things about you, that they're going to be able to look through a list of ingredients that enable them to imagine that you are this, or that you are that, or that you are whatever it is you are through the way you speak, and or through the way you move, and because of the tendencies that you obviously tend towards. He is, isn't he? Yes, definitely, I would say, definitely is. It is there, isn't it, whether you like it or not, the telltale signs that will arouse their suspicion, and occasionally, one would hope, their desire. He always seemed a bit dodgy to me. Is there, I have often wondered, a way I might be able to get away with it, to go through my life unnoticed? Or a way I might be able to escape? From what, though? That is it, isn't it? From what am I trying to escape? From the tendencies I happen to tend toward, from things that other people are going to notice things about me, and to assume that there is something I do not want them to assume. How to measure, that is it, isn't it? How to measure the investment or to measure the achievement of a lifetime. He has done well though, hasn't he, considering what are we supposed to consider or to take into account? You know, where he comes from and all of those other things. Other things, yes, all of those other things about him. I, for my part, what can I do about it? I can imagine a glass that is half full, or I can imagine a glass that is half empty, or I can imagine a glass that has been filled right up to the brim, and to the point where it is, I think, about to topple over, and to spill all over the place. Oh, you have made quite a mess of yourself, haven't you? Don't worry, we can soon mop it up. Is this it then? Is this what I'm thinking? Is this the most I can hope to achieve? To be standing here as I am at this moment, in front of you all? Well, I am. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to imagine myself as being a glass that is filled right up to the brim, that is about to topple over, but not quite. I think. What do I think? I think that whatever else it is, or it might be, or it might have been, this thing that is supposed to be the most. It must be something that's a stage higher, or 2, or 3, or 4, or whatever number it is, in what I might call it in the scheme of things, than I am myself at present. To be within a scheme of things, I think one must assume that there is an orderly pattern. A scheme relies upon a pattern of behaviour, or a pattern of whatever else it is, to create a sequence of events that becomes the inevitable consequence of the behaviour or of whatever else it is. I think. What do I think? I think that it was not my mother's intention that any of her children would become disorderly. I think that, and above all else, that it was her wish, her desire, or her whatever else it was, that we would be able to fit into a situation that would enable us to flourish. And this was not going to happen in Harpurhey unless your name is Bernard Manning. I think. What do I think? I think that I can only ever imagine this because I've never asked my mother, but I imagine her version of what a most might be would also be related to another sense which I imagine she had. That we would be able to develop our own sense of whatever it was we wanted to achieve. But that is the problem, isn't it? When one comes from a place that has already been designated as being, or whatever it is it has been designated, it is hard, I think, to be able to discount the experience or the effect of what the experience was. It is here, I think, within me, and about to topple over, and perhaps to spill all over the place. How do I, and this is an open question, or does anyone ever know what it is we are meant to achieve? Something for ourselves, or for the sake of our children. We will, won't we? We will sacrifice everything for them, because we want them to have a better opportunity than one we had to endure and to occasionally enjoy. Or perhaps we're just in it to win it. Isn't that the dream that so often guides us through those adolescent years? The notion of achievement is, it is in my mind, it is too end-weighted. If I'd been brought up in the leafy stockbroker village of Chorleywood West in Hertfordshire, rather than in the slums and then later on in a pebble-dashed house in a modern low-rise housing estate in Harpurhey, then perhaps I would have been able to develop a clearer sense of whatever it was I wanted to achieve. As it happened, I always felt as though I was clueless. I had a great deal of imagination, but not an obvious talent. What do you want to do when you leave school? The careers advisor asked me when he came into school on an annual visit to talk to the boys. I went to an all-boys school, who were in the final year of what was at that time the final year of statutory education. I told him I wanted to become an architect or perhaps a journalist. And I'm not entirely sure why I said this, a latest dream perhaps. School was not an enlightening experience for me. I spent most of my time in the classroom, daydreaming about one thing after another, and imagining myself to be having torrid sexual encounters with the other boys, and with most of the masters, male teachers. The careers advisor listened while I went on about whatever it was. He jotted down some notes. Then he stopped and he looked at a piece of paper. He said, you know you would have to do A-levels and then go on to university before you can become either an architect or a journalist. And I'm just looking at the results of your mock O-levels, which were otherwise known as GCSEs. And it doesn't look as though that's going to be an option for you. What does your dad do? He said. My dad? Yes, my dad. I told him my dad was a garment cutter in a clothing factory in Manchester. That's good, he said. Then I will arrange for you to have a week's work placement in the factory where your dad works. When in doubt, I suppose, send him down the same feudal pit as his father, and his father's father, and his father's father, before him, etc. Or else send them off to war. Join the army, lad, and that'll make a man of you. I failed all but 2 of my O-levels, my actual O-levels. I passed art with a B and classical studies with an A, which was quite a surprise, as I thought it would be the other way around. But there was something, I suppose, about ancient Greece that particularly appealed to me. My mother encouraged me to repeat my 5th form and to try to get a few more O-levels so that I would be able to continue to the 6th form to study A-levels. I did, and I did get a few more O-levels, English language, French, and another one I can't remember. Then I chose 3 A-levels, art, general studies, and economics. I chose art because it was easy, general studies because we all had to do that, and economics because I fancied myself as being in love with Mr. Bradley, the economics teacher. He was an ardent socialist. I was not myself at that time an ardent socialist, but I admired him because he was capable of a firm stance. He also wore what was then a tightly fitted 3-piece suit that fitted him so well, perhaps too well, because it became an utter distraction for me. I used to sit at the front of the classroom to one side, waiting for him to stand up and to take off his jacket as he turned around to go to the blackboard, where he would chalk up a variety of economic formula. Copy these down, you boys. Copy these down. But I could not concentrate on the formula. I was so enthralled by the way the dark blue fabric moved across the seat of Mr. Bradley's pants to reveal the outlines of his buttock. I was breathless. To be able to choose between one way of being or another, and as if there is, or as if there ever has been, a choice. Is there a choice? Or is it, I mean the whole notion of there being a choice, is it an illusion? I believe it is an illusion that gradually takes over our existence. We live in a world that is called a culture, whether we like it or not, that intrinsically and intricately links us all to one another. Our culture, in turn, is linked to each and every other culture. We live in a global culture. To live in a culture, we have to assume a specific sense of belonging. We also have to assume that we, as being whatever it is we are being as individuals, are actively engaged in a process of decision making. We have to make a choice. Do I like this colour or this one? Do I want a Diet Coke or do I want a Pepsi? Advertisers continuously take advantage of us by selling us a notion of choice to empower us. I think that we are more like a colony of bees living in a beehive, doing whatever it is we are supposed to do. Or we are more like a flock of sheep living on a hillside, or a flock of birds in the sky, or a shoal of fish in the sea. Or we are more like 30,000 battery-reared chickens living in a battery-reared chicken shed on a farm somewhere that is at the back of beyond, doing whatever it is we are, I suppose, supposed to do, until it is time for us to stop doing whatever it is we are doing, which is, of course, whatever it is we think we're supposed to do. Who knows, though? I do not know this, I'm only speculating, whilst I try to agitate a thought. I guess I'm guessing my way through my own existence, because that is all I think I can do, until it is time for me to stop doing whatever it is I think I am doing, because isn't that the point? We, or rather I think I should say I here, I'm trying to achieve or to gather, maybe that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to gather a clearer sense of whatever it is I am supposed to do. That this question keeps coming back to haunt me. What am I supposed to do? I think I want to try to get to the core, or to the kernel, or to the crux, or to the heart, or to the whatever else it is, or it might be, to the spirit, I suppose. And that is it. I want to try to get to the spirit, or to get into the spirit, or to bring the spirit into me. And I'm surprised when I hear myself saying this, that this is what I want to do, as I abandoned the notion of religion a long time ago. Now I would say to anyone who asks me, I am equally intolerant of all religions. To be able to get into the spirit of things, that is, whatever it is, or to be able to bring the Spirit into myself. And to be able to live in a world where people are going to appreciate the differences that are, it would seem to me, always going to exist between us. Through the vagaries and through the vagueness of a spirit that becomes whatever it is, through our own way of being whatever it is we are being, or that we are still trying to imagine ourselves to be becoming. Thank you.
Very kind, very kind.